Okay. So at the last session on this, we had an agenda review session. The Public Works Commission spoke to some of the issues that were outlined in the Davenport-Lawrence report, and of course those have been available for council consideration. There were some questions that were asked, and those questions were staffed and posted online, so folks can look at those. Some questions were answered by PWC, some were answered by city staff, and they're sorted that way so you can get those answers. But then the final piece of that meeting was to direct the city manager to come back with a way forward, if you will. So I'm here tonight to give you my best recommendation. And so I'm going to briefly speak to the historical context, opportunities to improve, benefits to citizens, offer suggestions for improvement in 4 key areas: strengthening governance, clarifying roles, eliminating duplication, and refining existing shared services, and then we'll outline some implementation. So the historical context, and a lot of this was covered by the analysis Davenport-Lawrence did. The city and the PWC essentially evolved independently in some ways over the last 100 years as separate type organizations, though they're all created through a single document, the city charter. The city council, just like every other city in North Carolina, has overall policy and fiduciary responsibility for the entire city organization. And you delegated a certain amount of more detailed work to the Public Works Commission. You appoint 4 commissioners, and they certainly do a lot more detailed work. The discussion that you had tonight recently about smart meters, and that you had at the last meeting about the Hoffer plant, as I understand it, that kind of conversation for some years now has historically not been held at the council level. So I found actually tonight's discussion to be quite informative and refreshing, and I also found the same to be true about the Hoffer plant information. I thought the kinds of questions the city council asked were exactly the kinds of questions that city council should be asking when you're talking about spending $100 million worth of city funds and putting $100 million worth of the city's borrowing capacity on the line. So I guess what that says is several councils over a period of years have indicated that really the oversight had faded over time, that the commission was relied upon to do all the detailed work, and things really just came through council. And I've heard this, I'm not using this word lightly, the council sort of rubber stamped the budget and some of these programs. That's one of the concerns that some council members have expressed. And then because of this sort of independent nature of growing up, certainly PWC is significant in size, 600 plus employees. The rest of the city organization, 1,400 employees. Any organization of that size is going to need to have HR functionality, finance functionality, IT support, and those sorts of things, communications, legal services. You're going to need all those services to exist. And so, unfortunately, rather than growing up as consolidated departments that serve both the broader city organization and PWC, each develop their own capacity. Now, as we stand today, city operations are overall well regarded. Sure, we hear complaints about city government from time to time, letters to the editor and all that stuff, but we've done some recent survey work. We did our citizen survey, and pretty universally across the city, citizens feel like we're delivering services in a good fashion. Our financial management is strong. We have, our bond rating is only one step away from AAA. We're getting clean audits year after year. and we win awards. We won an award this last year for our parking deck, for Veterans Park, for Main Street. So we are a leading city in North Carolina. And likewise, our utility operations, PWC, very well regarded. Rates are competitive, and they also win awards. Safety and reliability awards were given to PWC for continuous reliable service, and for 1 million hours, something like that, of 2 million hours of safe operations. So we've got great things going on here, but we can do better. Prior charter and legal reviews have happened several times. I wasn't here then, but clearly there were concerns, or we wouldn't keep coming back to the same issue. There have been several previous attempts to merge functions, and we have had some partial success. Purchasing, as the Davenport-Lawrence report shows, is a fairly successful merged operation. Now, there are probably some things we can do better. I know with Hire Fayetteville First, we didn't quite get to where we want to necessarily get, and there's some opportunities to continue to improve that. And we have some disagreement about how that arrangement is costed, but fundamentally working pretty well. Fleet, similar issues in that the fleet is well maintained. Our customer service reports from employees are that the vehicles are well maintained. There are some complaints here and there, but things that you would normally expect. There, it's primarily a cost issue that we need to readjust the cost arrangement, and we probably need to have some tighter understanding of broader management support, management decision-making about fleet, so that we get full fleet management support across both the broader city organization as well as PWC. So that's something we can improve on. And then we now have a city council liaison. Didn't have that. I think that's clearly a helpful thing as we continue to communicate better between the organizations. Again, these things are good, but we can do better. So what are the opportunities to improve? And that's what the report spoke about, really. The result of the fading city council oversight means that really the council's behaving inconsistent with state law. I mean, your job as the elected officials is to be the one oversight body that the citizens look to. The citizen stockholders vote for you, the board of directors, over the whole enterprise. The whole enterprise. We're unique, like Greenville is, in that you've delegated some extra authority to a subsidiary board, the PWC, to focus in a particular area, but ultimately you are responsible for budgeting all the money, borrowing all the borrowing, and making sure everything works. So if something fails in the police department, in the fire department, in Parks and Recreation, you're going to come after me to make something right. And if something fails on the utility side, you're going to go to the PWC and tell them you got to make it right. It's ultimately your responsibility. But failing to do that is inconsistent with the charter, because the charter is part of a greater whole. The responsibility is on the council. And so we've lost some policy coherence. We've unfortunately let some of our overall fiduciary responsibility misalign a bit. We unfortunately have some reduced coordination, some lost efficiency, and clearly a lack of unity of command, to use military parlance. But that's okay, because negatives can be turned into positives if we treat them as an opportunity to improve. Another area of opportunity to improve beyond the governance issue is this duplication issue. And so I spoke of how the two parts of the organization have evolved separately, and Davenport-Lawrence speaks to this. When you have two HR departments, two finance departments, two IT departments, two communications departments, two corporate development departments, you end up with lost capacity, because instead of having, it's one of those, the sum of the parts would be greater if they were together, but by keeping them separate, you have double the overhead, and you lose the chance to have expertise development of those assets, you lose a chance to specialize and create extra capacity. So we've lost some capacity and diluted some of our staff expertise. And then we don't have particularly good coordination and communications with those groups because they're working in their silos. And that creates a certain amount of additional cost and complexity. So we get vendors who may come to us and say, oh, we've got this great new type of pipe. We think you should take a look at it. It's going to save you money. Well, over on our side, we say, well, you're talking to the wrong people. You need to go talk to PWC. Like, what are you talking about? What does that mean? We have to explain all that. Or, just when we do our CAFR. So one financial software system is developing the financials for PWC, and another software system is developing the financials for the city. And then we have to, after the year's over, we have to fold it all in, create a new document, and then we have an auditor run it over there and run it over here. It's just not quite the synergy that it could be. And then pay, benefits, and other practices are not aligned. So we know that we had our recent study about city employee pay, and we compared to Cumberland County, and we compared to PWC, and we saw that for similar job classes in the same city, in the same overall organization, we have significant pay disparity. And that's just something that over time has happened because we've had this kind of bifurcated development. So how do we improve? How do we move past this decline in governance by the City Council and deal with this duplicate or overlapping responsibility? 4 key areas. Strengthen governance by City Council. Eliminate duplicate support functions as far as practical. Clarify Council and PWC roles, and refine existing shared services agreements. And I think those are the kinds of recommendations that came out of the study, and I've tried to boil them down to the way I see it is the most effective going forward. And why would we do this? Well, ultimately, it's to benefit the citizens. We are in our jobs to do right by them. You are elected, like I said, by the shareholders of this community to benefit the owners, the stockholders of this city. And so the benefits to them will be cost avoidance. When I got here and I looked at certain functions that we did not have, like a budget department, like an audit department, for example, the first thing I could have done is said, Council, there is no other city above 100,000 population that doesn't have a budget department and an audit department. So I would propose that we raise taxes and hire people to do that. That would have been a proverbial lead balloon proposal. So I just think that the first thing you need to do is figure out what you can do with the assets you have. Well, we have plenty of assets when we combine the 2 organizations. It doesn't make any sense to me that we don't have those kinds of functions in an organization this size. I think it's because we're not taking advantage of the synergy that's right in front of us. So I'm recommending that we do these things first before we ever go back to the taxpayers and ratepayers and talk about changing rates and taxes. So cost avoidance. We can reduce pressure on taxes and utility rates if we look at how we can get better productivity by realigning our organization. Savings through efficiency, a lot of those kind of miscommunications and things about having different groups doing the same thing. We can get savings through efficiency, eliminating duplication, same thing, reduced overhead. We don't need 2 department heads of all those groups. We can get away with 1. Better coordination and communications, greater accountability to citizens, so they, we've had people send us letters and complaints about, a utility bill or whatever. Why can't you help me with it? Well, we don't, I can't help with that. That needs to go over to PWC, or vice versa. They have an issue about city right-of-way or something. Well, that's really the city's right-of-way. We're just doing work in it. People don't know who's on first. Improve customer service, seamless operations. That's what we all expect now more and more and more from the private sector. We want to call one number. We want to talk to somebody who can solve the problem right there. So if we could have things like unified call center, where we're all coordinated, one Fay solves it all, that sort of thing. That's what people want to see, improve customer service. So let's talk about what that looks like. Strengthening City Council oversight in the policy, financial, budgetary, and legal areas, communication, unifying the city PWC brand and messaging, and deal with this issue that's sort of an unusual issue, contributions to arts, culture, economic development, etc. So without question, the City Council is the policy-making body, is overall responsible for financial information. You're responsible for the audit, you're responsible for the consolidated annual financial report, not the commission. You are responsible for adopting the budget, not the commission. You're responsible for legal matters with your city attorney. You get sued, not the commission. You need to own these things and be responsible for those highest level decisions. Communication with two different voices, it's very unclear sometimes who's on first. If you're going to be responsible for these things, you need to also own the communication with your citizens and with the world. We also need to, I think, reflect upon the report's comment about this separate branding and messaging. It's the City of Fayetteville's utilities. I don't have any problem with the Public Works Commission branding their paperwork. It's from the Commission. The Commission has made a decision. The Commission believes this. The Commission transmits a report to Council. That's great. But the utility is the City of Fayetteville's utility. And I don't know what, we have thousands of people. They showed earlier this evening 90,000 move-in, move-outs per year, something like that. How many of those people see a truck go by, it says PWC on it? To them, that's Duke Power, it's Progress, and they have no idea it's a municipal utility owned by the city. There's been some recent effort to try to change that with the, Fayetteville's hometown utility. That's movement in the right direction. But still, I think that we need to really think about making it very clear this is the city's utilities. It's not a private company. And we need to think about unifying the city's branding and messaging. And then this contributions to arts, culture, and economic development. There's a bit of an issue in this community that's unusual elsewhere. I think I appreciate the desire of the commissioners to want to support community activities, arts and culture. We're all in this together. We want to support, let's say, a play or a music event and all that stuff. The problem is that there really is no authority to spend utility money on that. There just isn't. The City Council has a statutory authorization to support arts and culture, economic development, museums, cemeteries. There's a list of things you have the statutory authority to do. So those decisions need to be made by the council. To the extent that there is a slice of utility revenue that can come to the general fund to support economic development or appropriately allocated for overall benefit of the city, that may be fine. We can talk about what that looks like. But ultimately, this kind of decision needs to be made by the elected board, the governing board of the community who has the statutory authority to spend money on those things, not by a water, sewer, and electric board. There's just no statutory authority to do that. So clarifying the roles, council fulfills its policy and oversight role, fulfills the community support and marketing role, provides support services for the entire city enterprise, reducing duplication wherever possible, and PWC is left, like the charter says, to focus on electric, water, and wastewater operations, just like they told you tonight. They're going to focus laser-like on advanced metering, focus laser-like on reliability improvements at the Hoffer plant. They don't need to be bogged down in what their personnel policies are and what HR systems they use and all this stuff that supports their organization. Who's doing their team building, who's doing the strategic planning, all that stuff. They need to focus on the utility work, and they're doing a good job at that. We can provide all the rest of those support functions through a unified management structure.
So, Mr. Voorhees, does that third bullet mean that anything that could be merged would be merged under the city? Would, say, if two HRs, if there's some synergy there, that would...
Let me come back and answer that in my final couple of slides.
Okay.
That's when we get into this elimination of duplication. We believe developing a unified support service function organization that handles finance, treasury, risk management, budget and capital planning, strategic planning, performance management, human resources and organizational development, GIS, email, network support, call center, and others is identified. All these things are opportunities for appropriate realignment, opportunities. And I'm not going to say that every single one of these must be under the city manager side of the house versus the commission side of the house. But certainly some of them clearly need to be, because you need to have direct line of control as the elected board. So how do we decide what should be merged and where it should land? Come right back to that. Right now, we've already got these three existing under PWC's control: fiber, fleet management, and purchasing. We know fleet management and purchasing work pretty well, but we need to realign cost and do some tweaking. I don't necessarily see these have to move. Those are examples of ones that may be fine where they are, but we just need to refine it. Now, I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, and I might like them to come over for certain reasons. City council might decide you like purchasing somewhere else because of some of the things we've run into, but that remains to be seen based on some further analysis. Fiber, on the other hand, that one's an outlier. We got to work on that one, because right now we're being charged for service in a way that there really isn't any authority to charge for, and we're being charged for capital over and above capital we've already paid. So we got to get that one fixed out. But as far as who operates and maintains fiber, PWC's got the best equipment and people. They already have the staff that know how to do it. They already have the trucks to get up on the poles. So it probably makes sense that they run that utility, but we need to have some different governance around how that works. And so now we'll get into the implementation to talk a little bit about that. How do we make these decisions? So my recommendation is immediately, within the next 90 days, council reestablish its appropriate city council oversight. You've already taken that step by doing what you did tonight to look at the advanced metering and looking at the Hoffer plant investment. You already have started on that path. I don't think it was that hard. I thought council asked exactly the kind of questions I would expect the city council who's engaged in these issues to ask at the last meeting and this meeting. And we can keep doing that. And the commission will have pre-screened it by working the problem to get it to this level of detail. The staff of PWC then presents it, and then you engage it. And it looks like both those two issues, over $100 million worth of investment, seem like they're pretty much ready for you all to move forward on because of the work that PWC has done. But I wouldn't be very comfortable with putting things like that on a consent agenda and not having this kind of dialogue, or not having the kind of dialogue at the last meeting and just passing on $52 million worth of water treatment plant upgrades without ever having been briefed. If that's the way it's been done in the past, I'm not very comfortable with that, and I hope you are. I hope you're more comfortable with what we just did. And then immediately realign legal, communications, and branding. This notion that legal services can be provided by a portion of the city separate from being whoever's responsible to the city council, that's very concerning to me. I think one of the answers to the question that was just posed, that was posted online, is did the commission spend any money having charter review work done? And the answer is yes. And it was several $1,000s, and we didn't know about it. I have a huge problem with that. a huge problem with that. I think that all legal services need to be through your city attorney who you appoint, who is accountable to you, and no board, commission, department of this organization should be out doing separate legal work. Hiring independent counsel privately from the knowledge of this city council, I mean, that's just not acceptable. So we need to consolidate all legal services, make it clear that that comes through your city attorney, and the appropriate support can be given to whichever board, commission, department needs it, but it needs to be transparent and clear that it's coming through your city attorney. Communication, same thing. We don't need to have a separate media mechanism out there arguing against what City Council believes to be the best interest of this community. There are elements of communication that PWC absolutely needs to be out there. We need to be educating people about smart meters. We need to be educating people about conservation. Absolutely. Those marketing programs absolutely need to continue. And they can be coordinated through a central coordinated communications function that the City Council will understand and know about. And then branding. I think we benefit by making it clear to everybody it is the City of Fayetteville's utilities. And then we need to reestablish the city-defined treasury role. There have been concerns expressed in the blogosphere, in some early media reports, on radio, that this is about grabbing utility money. We're going to grab some treasury funds. We've said it once, we've said it again, we've said it again. Utility money needs to be for utility purposes. But there's nobody in this state that I know of that that operates utilities, that doesn't have separate utility funds, that doesn't manage those funds for the benefit of the utility. So how we got to a place that the commission has a separate pot of reserve funds, separate sinking funds, separate capital funds, a litany of funds that are managed separately from the city, I don't know how we got there, other than to say that it must have just grown up over time. And the city overall allowed it to happen for ease, for convenience, for expedience, whatever. But there's no reason why the city's chief financial officer cannot manage those reserve funds as the treasurer, and the PWC can use their operating funds to pay their bills. So, if there's a debt service payment, it's a simple act of wire transfer from the city managed funds to make that debt service payment. That's what everybody else does. That's what they do in Charlotte, that's what they do in Raleigh, that's what they do in Greensboro and Durham, and Winston-Salem, and Salisbury, and Wilson, and Wilmington, and I mean, they all do it that way, so it's not like it can't be done. And you are responsible for those funds. The city council is responsible for that fund. So if we don't make a debt service payment, it doesn't come down on the commission, it comes down on the city council. So why wouldn't you make your payments? So let's redefine or reestablish a city-defined treasury role, but we can't do it precipitously. We have to develop a transition plan for non-operating accounts and develop treasury procedures. The last thing we need to do is anything that would come across as destabilizing or confusing to investors. The city of Fayetteville has a great bond rating for debt issued on the city of Fayetteville's revenue bonds that are co-branded as City of Fayetteville PWC. But it's your debt authority. You issue the debt. We don't want to disturb that rating, so we need to develop the appropriate treasury procedures to transfer those treasury responsibilities over where they belong from this arrangement where it is now. Phase 2 of the study for support services. That's where we're going to do the detailed work that decides which support services ought to be housed where. We're going to bring our recommendations, bring the consultant back, fully engage at a detailed level with commission staff and city staff, which services ought to go where, And so high level, well, actually, I have some of that in the next slide, but let me take your question then.
I did. So, so you said you wanted to make sure that we didn't do anything that was destabilizing to PWC. How do we find out? How do we find out the impact of what we are planning to do before we do it? Does that entail another study? So when people say, oh my God, their bond ratings are going to go crazy if you touch that. How do we figure out the true impact of our proposed plan to their financial well-being, to their operational well-being? How do we do that?
So, so that's where we work closely with the, bond council, the local government commission, our chief financial officers of respective organizations to get those treasury procedures as clear as they can be. But we're managing these funds for the benefit of the entire organization. It should have no impact on the bond rating. It's just it's an internal reorganization. We just want to make sure that we comply with rate covenants, bond covenants, clearly communicate our intent to the appropriate officials and folks at the rating agencies that this is a reorganization and that we're not doing it precipitously, where the funds are going, and get that all clear as opposed to sort of rush in and do it,
Right.
In 2 weeks or something.
So we wouldn't do anything until we get that feedback from the.
It'll be an orderly process, but I don't, for those who say that somehow this would, jeopardize the bond rating, to me it makes absolutely no sense that you have a parent organization with a higher bond rating assuming the Treasury role for its child organization with a lower bond rating. How is that going to negatively affect your bond rating? It makes no sense at all. I think that's just a red herring. And clearly, we know what we're doing. We'll work with the local government commission and bond council to make sure it's very clear what's going on. And these funds will not pour into the general fund to be spent on anything that you wish. We must maintain these funds for the purpose that they were established, whether it's pay debt or pay capital or rate stabilization or whatever.
Mr. Voorhees?
But having also, yes sir.
I'm sorry, just real quick. One of the last meetings I had as a PWC liaison, Mr. Nolan had made a presentation. This was shortly after the main road near the Hopper plant, and they have a fund balance, control for future improving of infrastructure. Are you saying that, and you mentioned all these pots of money that they have, but would that not be better to have that set aside for them for decision making? Or are you saying all of that come over under?
And that's exactly why we need to have, a transition plan and Treasury procedures to make it very clear which accounts go where. I have no interest in having PWC hamstrung because they don't have appropriate access to operating funds. It may include contingency accounts and those sorts of things. We have to just right-size that so that it can work. I mean, they have $300 million worth of expenditures annually, so clearly they're going to need significant cash management, flexibility. So it's not about creating problems there, but the reserve accounts don't need to be housed in the Treasury function of the utility. They need to be housed in the Treasury function of the overall organization. So we will create the appropriate level of procedures and flexibility so that they have access to the types of funds that they need for contingencies, for reserves, and those sorts of things. And then, if they go beyond that, that's when you get into a conversation with transfers from the reserves, which often those kinds of things need to come to council. In other cities, when you go tap into certain levels of reserves, you have to come to the governing board. And so we'll be able to work that out if we can have the kind of constructive, productive dialogue that I think we need to have. And then initiating phase 2, that's where we get into the details of exactly what should be consolidated and how. And that's why we need some help. The study will be Davenport Lawrence folks who can look at skill sets of individuals, skills that need to be provided by the central function, and then mapping out where all the people pour into the organization.
Now, Mr. Voorhees, I think when we approved the first funding of the study, I think we paid $100,000.
Yes.
How much are these subsequent studies going to cost us?
So we have an additional $100,000 available in the current budget. We think that it would make more sense because we certainly know that PWC has expressed concern about wanting to be more involved in this process, and they need to be involved in this process if we're going to be successful. And so we would like to extend an opportunity for them to invest with us in this process and be partners in the funding of it, if that's a shared interest. And so that gets us into talking about perhaps a couple $100,000 project.
Okay, but we have $100,000 allocated.
Right.
But that's not the total cost of this.
I think we're looking at it more like a couple $100,000 for this next phase, and depending on how many, what we can get done in this next year, it might be that we end up having to go into a third year, and I can't really tell you how, depends on how much productivity we get out of the first year as to whether we need to do it another year, and I wouldn't be able to guess the funding level for a third year.
So I would like to, just to know that dollar amount for that phase 2, whether or not PWC participates with us or not, because we're going to have to do you said we already have $100,000, but we'd have to do a fund, a budget amendment. So can we find out what going it alone will cost us, and what, I'd like to know that.
Sure. What we do, I can tell you the order of magnitude. We had a $400,000 level scope, RFP when we started all this. We've now done a piece of that, so there's a $300 delta from the original scope. But I think we know a lot more now about what the next phase looks like, and so we can try to refine that. One of the big, loose ends, if you will, on figuring that scope out is how much IT work has to be done. That will be probably the most expensive. And as you'll see in a later piece here, I don't think we need to tackle that right now because PWC is right in the middle of Project Navigate. The last thing we want to do is disrupt that project from being successful. So that may actually come off the list and be a future issue that may or may not require further study depending on how things go on the front end. So we got a few pieces of flexibility there. I'm comfortable giving an estimate of a $200,000 next phase will get us a long way. And then finishing up immediate in the next 1 to 3 months would be that we go ahead and step right into what the council and PWC commissioners have all agreed to already that our consultant talked about is we can work this out with fleet purchasing and fiber. We can work this out. We just need to sit down and develop better service level agreements and cost plans. So those are the things I think we can do in the first 3 months, just to refresh. Reestablish oversight, realign legal communications and branding, reestablish the Treasury role, at least initially, initiate phase 2 of the study, revise the cost plans and SLAs for fleet, purchasing, and fiber. Then midterm, over the remainder of this fiscal year and into the beginning of next, that's when we really get into developing the support services realignment plan. So we start the study, and then these are the areas we work on over the next 6 to 18 months. So out of that study work will come recommendations for what's the low-hanging fruit, what's the little higher hanging fruit, what's the fruit that maybe we just can't get to at this point. And then clearly as we work on our budget process for FY15, we need to reinforce the city council budget and financial oversight. So we're gonna want to do kind of like we did tonight, kind of like we did at the last meeting, You're going to want to have more council involvement in the budget process for PWC. So instead of just getting, here's the ordinance for, $200 million electric fund, $100 million water and sewer fund, the financial plan for fleet, have a nice day, we're going to want to have budget workshops by the city council, much like the PWC commissioners have, that explains what's in the spending plan for the electric fund, what's in the spending plan for the water and sewer fund. We don't need to go line by line, but what programs, at what level, so that you can make an informed decision, and any adjustments you need to make. And then after that is ongoing integration. If you're going to merge organizations that frankly shouldn't be separate, but are culturally separate, that's what's been identified, they're culturally separate, we need ongoing integration, implementing the support services realignment plans that comes out of that midterm study will be an ongoing bit of work. It's going to take willingness on the part of the commission and the commission staff that we want to be successful in this. And we'll study further realignment opportunities as they become available, like information technology, ERP. We want to delay that until Project Navigate is complete. We don't want that to be unsuccessful. That's a huge investment for the benefit of all. And we'll also want to see whether we need to migrate the city ERP to the Oracle platform, or take our existing system and try to integrate it with their Oracle platform. That remains to be evaluated. Pay and benefits, there is a clear distinction that utility employees' pay and benefits are to be determined by the commission. I don't have a quarrel with that, but having similar positions, like classified positions, being paid and benefited differently in the same organization, I think is problematic. And so I think we ought to work together to try to find a way to align those over time. Similarly, there's certain employment practices that we might want to align, how people deal with grievances, and whether the Personnel Review Board applies, whether the Ethics Commission applies. To me, it doesn't make any sense that city employees, all those things apply, but then on the commission side, none of those things apply. Picking and choosing doesn't make sense. It either all applies to everybody or doesn't apply to any of them. And I think the city council needs to work on that. Capital planning and debt planning, again, why you didn't know about some of these tens of millions of dollars worth of decisions sooner is because of just how we got here over time. I thought we did good work today. You should be getting that kind of information ongoing, sooner. Don't want to be surprised. Debt planning, $100 million worth of borrowing decisions were made in the last 2 weeks. That is huge. So we're going to do a better job of integrating our capital planning and debt planning ongoing for this board so that you'll see these things coming in advance. So that's my view of how we can move forward. And from my perspective, after I answer any questions, the next step would be to direct the city manager to bring an implementing resolution to carry out what you saw tonight, carry it out to your next meeting on September 9th. Happy to take any questions.
Anybody? Questions?
Can I ask the questions as we went along?
Mike, do you have any? No questions?
So when we bring this to council, this resolution means that we've not committed to it until we get all the results back from the bond council and the local government council. That's what we're saying, correct?
So a proposed resolution to carry this out would be basically to map out all these decisions from a policy standpoint.
Okay.
But I think to be clear, any of those shared services mergers would have to come after study. So the study would happen,
Okay.
and then
And then
those things would come back to council for action
Gotcha,
with commission involvement.
gotcha.
As
And some of those could happen and some of them couldn't happen.
Some of those could happen, some of those we could decide not to do. That's right. On all the things that were in the governance area, to me, those happen at the time council takes those steps, you were implementing it, and that is the policy decision. With just a note that on the Treasury procedures, some of those need to be worked out, as I said, to make sure that we are in full compliance with bond covenants, bond councils involved, that we crosswalk the funds over appropriately, the LGC is aware, so that we don't do anything that creates any uncertainty.
Mr. Voorhees, so by approving this tonight, your functional alignment, we'd be approving a couple $100,000 more?
At the present time, to initiate the study, and that would be in the resolution next Monday, you would be authorizing me to execute a phase 2 at the appropriation level that's already approved. So I have $100,000 in the current budget that y'all adopted. That's all I have at this point in time. I'm recommending that we reach out to the Public Works Commission and invite them to join in this process for an additional $100,000. So I have a $200,000 contract, and that would be my recommendation. If they don't do it, then you would have to take a look at it at budget time and see if you're going to have it done through a budget transfer or stretch it out over 2 years, something like that.
So I just have one more question.
Sure. No, this is a good time to ask questions.
So when we got the original report back from Davenport, and there seemed to be some disagreement between the city and PWC, and I know there were a couple of meetings with staff. Are we saying that before we go and enter to this new agreement with them, are you of the opinion that what they did was good, solid consulting work? It was not flawed, because it seemed to be such a dichotomy between what they said and what PWC. Did they do good work at the end of the day? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I do think so, at the end of the day, that they did good work. Were there some informalities or details that could be tweaked? Sure. It's a big, complex issue, but I think fundamentally their work was sound. On the Fort Bragg agreement, we're all probably going to get out of having to solve that problem simply because of an act of the General Assembly. But if that hadn't happened, then we would end up having to work to renegotiate that agreement. And frankly, the city attorney's opinion is that some of the mods to that agreement were not done correctly and are voidable. I mean, that I think is just symptomatic of the problems that Davenport and Lawrence reported on.
Any other questions? So what's the direction to staff here? Bring this back September 9th, next Monday? Can you see some hands or nods or something on this? Need to stay a little bit longer, I'm sorry.
Bring it back.
All right, we'll bring it back on the 9th. Thank you, sir, for your good work. Okay, I believe we've concluded business tonight before 8 o'clock. Motion to adjourn. Okay, thanks for coming.